Re is a prefix which, like pro, see pro, has more than one meaning. In this section, we'll focus on the meaning again. We use re words with this meaning every day: redo, reheat, recheck, reread, resell, repaint, etc., and we feel free to make up new ones as needed. But in plenty of other re words, the meaning isn't so obvious. Remorse, a deep regret arising from a sense of guilt for past wrongs. Remorse for the accident that occurred that night seems to have altered the course of the senator's life. In Latin, mordere means to bite, thus, remorse is something that gnaws at you over and over. In criminal court, judges are always looking for signs that a convicted felon is suffering remorse for his crime. If not, the judge may well lengthen his sentence or deny him parole after serving part of it. Remorse is stronger than mere regret. Real remorse is the kind of thing that may last a lifetime. Reiterate, to state or do over again or repeatedly. At the end of every class, Professor Lewis reiterates that we should get an early start on our term papers. In Latin, iterum means again, so reiterate has the basic meaning of repeat over and over. Our word iteration is used a lot by computer programmers today, often meaning a repeated response to program instructions that gets something closer to its final form, but also often meaning a new version of something, such as a program. But a reiteration is simply a repeat or several repeats. Rejuvenate, to make young or youthful again, to give new vigor to. He was in bad shape after his wife's death, but everyone says he's been rejuvenated by his remarriage. Juvenes, Latin for young, can be seen in a word such as juvenile. Rejuvenation is something that can be carried out on a creaky old house, a clunker of a car, a sluggish career, a weak economy, or a company that's lost its edge, but rejuvenate and rejuvenation are probably used most often for talking about our physical selves. Ads for lotions promise skin rejuvenation, diet book covers show rejuvenated, or maybe just young, models bursting with health. We still seem to be searching for that fuente de la juventud that Juan Ponce de Leon failed to discover 500 years ago. Reconcile, 1. To make agree. 2. To make friendly again. Now she has to reconcile her liking for her brother-in-law with the news that he was picked up for armed robbery last week. In Latin, conciliare means to calm, soothe, thus, reconcile means essentially to calm again. Warring friends can often be reconciled by a nice note or apology. When you're faced with two things that don't square very well, you may have to reconcile them, the way a scientist might try to reconcile the differing results from two research projects. The U.S. House and Senate, in a process called reconciliation, try to produce one final bill from two different versions that they passed separately. To reconcile yourself to something means to get used to it. Thus, you may need to reconcile yourself to not getting to the beach next summer, or you may have reconciled yourself to the idea of your daughter in the Peace Corps marrying a Mongolian goat herder. Re dash, in its other main sense, means back or backward. Since doing something again means going back to it, the two senses are actually related. Still, the meaning of re in most words is pretty clearly one or the other. So a rebound comes back at you. To recall means to call back a memory, and to react is to act back at someone else's action. Reciprocal, 1. Done, given, or felt equally by both sides. 2. Related to each other in such a way that one completes the other or is the equal of the other. They had done us a great favor, so as a reciprocal gesture we invited them for a weekend on the island. In Latin, reciprocus means returning the same way or alternating. So in a reciprocating engine, like the one in your car, the pistons move back and forth, and that motion is transformed into the rotary motion of the crankshaft. A reciprocal is a pair of numbers, such as 5/6 and 6/5, that can be multiplied to produce one. Reciprocity, with the accent on the third syllable, between two nations means they agree to recognize certain things granted in one country as being valid in the other, for example, your driver's license. Rebut, 1. To oppose by argument. 2. To prove to be wrong. The claims about receiving payoffs from builders were eventually rebutted by the mayor's office, but the damage had been done. The but in rebut once meant basically but, so rebut's original meanings were to drive or beat back and to attack with violent language. Rebuttals can still be rather violent, as anyone who has watched some heated moments in a presidential debate can testify. The word is often used by lawyers, since the lawyer for the accused or for the party being sued almost always tries to rebut the charges against his or her client, but it's also used in plenty of contexts outside the courtroom. Revoke, to officially cancel the power or effect of something, such as a law, order, or privilege. His real estate license had been revoked after his conviction for fraud 3 years earlier. Since vocare means to call in Latin, CVOC, to revoke is to call back. Your driver's license could be revoked after about 3 convictions for driving under the influence of alcohol. Some people's licenses are even revoked for life. You could get your passport revoked if a judge thought you had violated the terms of your bail and suspected you might skip the country. And if you're out of prison on probation and violate the terms of probation, it will probably be revoked and you'll end up back in the slammer. Regress, to return to an earlier and usually worse or less developed condition or state. In the years since she had left, the country seemed to have regressed badly, and its corruption and dire poverty had gotten much harder to ignore. As you might guess, regress is the opposite of progress. So, if a disease regresses, that's generally a good thing, but in most other ways we prefer not to regress. If someone's mental state has been improving, we hope he or she won't start to regress, and when a nation's promising educational system begins to regress, that's a bad sign for the country's future. Economists often distinguish between a progressive tax and a regressive tax. In a progressive tax, the percentage that goes to taxes gets larger as the amount of money being taxed gets larger, while in a regressive tax, the percentage gets smaller. Rich people prefer regressive taxes.